everyone. Welcome to our second task force meeting. It's going to be a good meeting. We'll meet a couple of folks that we didn't meet last time, but at the same time, we have some guests here to talk to us today. And it's great to be at the Township Association with us. And thanks for hosting us today. And we're trying to have our meetings spread, the different areas where our task force members are, and also members of the community. So this is a great step to be able to at least be in a place where it's not just in the same talk. As far as the agenda for today, like I said earlier, we will let a few folks introduce themselves that were able to make the last task force meeting. From that, we'll get into a little bit just an overview of the Minnesota Association of Townships, just because they hosted us, and usually we let the host tell us a little bit about themselves whenever we have that opportunity. I don't know if Tom is with us here or online, Tom Karst from NTIA, but usually he'll give us a 10 to 15 minute update on what's happening at the NTIA level. If he's not, we might wait a little bit later in the agenda and see how that goes. Bree will give us an update on BEAD and some of the developments there. And then we'll get into also the digital opportunity update. From that, we will that should take us to the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Central. We'll take a break. And then we'll have a few other folks talk to us. One will be the commissioner of DEED, so the Department of Employment and Economic Development. We'll have a 10-minute update there. And then finally, we have our presentation for the day, which is from Pew. And both Catherine and Jake are here with us today. So we'll get a chance to hear from them. We do a broadband overview, and then we just talk about subgroups. I think I mentioned that last time. Typically at the task force, most of our meetings will be in the task force when we get together, but a lot of times it's been beneficial in the past to have some small subgroups take up some small topics, either suggest some presenters that should come to the larger task force, or even debate maybe some of the smaller issues and bring some recommendations forward. So we won't get into subgroups today, but we'll talk about that format, maybe give you some time to think about which subgroup you might want to be on before our next meeting. And then around 12:30 or whenever that time is, we will call it a day and wrap up and have some lunch for those of you who are here with us in person. So that's the agenda for the day. Again, thanks everybody for being here. It'll be good. It'll be a great discussion. So with that, maybe we'll start with some folks that were not at the first task force meeting a couple of weeks ago. And we'll do some introductions. And as far as that introduction, just tell us who you are, who you're representing, as well as the interest for why you're on the task force itself. And then so what do you hope to get out of it over the next couple of years, right? So what are some of the recommendations to put forward? And if you think about this, also helps kind of inform which subject you might want to be on. We want to make sure that we're putting in the right way. So with that, I know it's with you, right? So.
Yes. So I'm Melissa Wolf. Great to meet you all and happy to be here. I am the executive director for the Minnesota Cable Communications Association. I've actually only been in that role for about a month. Prior to that, I was with an MCCA member company, Midco, and I worked in government relations, working with federal, state, and local elected officials. A lot of my position there was based at the community level. So the last 4 years working with the community that Midco served, either through growth through private investment or grant opportunities, was just a great experience. And so I'm looking forward to working with all of MCCA's companies to continue that work, and really excited to be here and on this board at this really pivotal time. The next 4 years will be, like I said, very pivotal to ensure that everybody has a fast, reliable, affordable broadband connection. And I look forward to being part of the solution to get that done. So great to meet you all. I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, Brianna Melny. I am the economic developer for Redwood County. I've served in my role for just about 6.5 years. Of the 6.5 years, 4 years have been pretty well dedicated to working out projects with our internet providers to develop projects and identify areas of which we need to continue to work on in addressing our broadband connectivity needs. So I never thought in my career that I would be passionate about broadband. But it's hard not to be in a meeting, whether we're talking childcare, housing, workforce needs, and broadband is absolutely part of that conversation, everything that we do. So I'm really looking forward to representing Southwest Minnesota. In particular, certainly at a county level, I think there's a lot of leveraging that can happen with our local economic developers, and would gladly serve as a liaison. I represent the Minnesota Association of Professional County Economic Developers, also known as MAPSA. I serve as their president, and so I have the privilege of working alongside some amazing professionals across our state, all striving for very similar goals. So yeah, I have lots I want to get out of this group, and look forward to learning and being a part of, yes, the solution as it moves forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Brianna.
I'm Ryan Wood. I work for Wildlife Preservation. We have a fiber to the home ISP up in northern Minnesota, and I am here to get to know everybody.
Did I miss anyone who was not here last time? All right, awesome. Well, great to meet everybody, and thanks for being on the task force and serving. And it's really exciting to have you. And I think there'll be some good things that'll come out of this. I mean, usually we have a lot of discussion about lots of presentations first and lots of discussions after that with some recommendations forward. Not all the recommendations get adopted, although we would love for that to happen. But a key few ones are always discussed even at the legislator level. And we'll insert ourselves, whether it's through the report that we have to develop every year, or even some letters here and there, depending on if it's a critical time of the year. And those have gone quite far and been received very well. So appreciate having you on the task force and look forward to collaborating together. Okay, so moving on to our next agenda item. It's kind of a little bit over the overview. Steve Fensky, who is on the task force, was not able to be here with us today, but he represents the Minnesota Association of Townships. He was gracious enough to offer up to host this meeting. Unfortunately, last minute he wasn't able to make it here, but wanted to learn a little bit more about the Minnesota Association of Townships. So with that, you can have Jeff Wright representing us and kind of giving us a little bit of an overview of the organization. And again, thank you for hosting us today.
I'm actually not Mr. Krieger. He's unable to attend. My name is Granberg Moberg. I'm happy to have counsel here with the association. But I'd like to welcome you all here to the association and thank you for attending. So yeah, I'll just say a few words about the nature of our organization and sort of what we do. So Minnesota has approximately, if you check Wikipedia, it'll say 1,790. If you check the Senate Research Committee, it'll say 1,783. I say less than 1,800 townships. We are an organization, a nonprofit formed by those townships to offer support. My one-liner about my job is I teach very small towns how not to accidentally commit crimes. So we are there are about 1 million people who live in townships in the state of Minnesota. And this is a fascinating, it is, for my money, the most fun unit of government there is. It is extremely voter focused. One of the things, two things that distinguish it most from other forms of government are we have fairly direct democracy. So for those of you who know townships, this will be review, but for folks who don't, I find this fascinating. We have an annual meeting at which the voters can do things like set their own taxes directly. They can sometimes, under some circumstances, pass laws directly, but mostly they turn powers on and off for the board. Sort of the default structure of a town is 3 elected town supervisors who comprise the town board, an elected clerk, and an elected treasurer. And our job is to provide support to those folks. There are about 9,000 of them in the state of Minnesota, give or take. We are, of course, deeply interested in broadband, and we are very thankful for the work that the task force is doing on broadband access. Of course, partially this is a matter of just economic development, as I'm sure you all know, economic opportunity for our citizens. Partially it's a matter of the world is moving on. Electronic reporting requirements are becoming normal, and our members are sometimes quite small and sometimes quite constrained in terms of their ability to access the internet. So as I'm sure all of you are familiar, HF2 that passed this year has certain reporting requirements that are online only. And some of our members literally do not have access to the internet. So we think that it's incredibly important for to expand this sort of access. And I'd just like to thank you all. You do.
Any questions or comments on that?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
if you haven't been to an annual meeting, I would recommend seeing the grassroots, as it says up here, that those governmental meetings are truly what we're all about. I have the opportunity, I represent well over 30 townships, and I try to get to at least 3 or 4 of them yearly, and they are very energy charged at times. And the people that devote their time and energy, whether you're the treasurer, the clerk, or one of the elected supervisors, really do a magnificent job of township government. And if you're not familiar with that and want to delve into it, because that's where a lot of these access issues with broadband are coming from, some of our smaller townships and just begging for it. And I know we'll talk probably more about that when we get into the BEAD update, but yeah, an interesting form of government, but very, very functional. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. And then just a quick question on that. So is broadband a topic that comes up quite a bit then at those meetings?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
And so what's the usually, yeah, we want broadband, but there any?
Yes, I mean, our members have been very focused on this for a very long time. I believe the first time that so of course we had an LNR process where the members sort of posed topics for us to sort of lobby the state on, and I believe we've been doing broadband for 15 years now, something like that. It is certainly something that I will take questions from members on 12 times a week at our meetings. Somebody will always come up to me and say, hey, what are we doing on this? How's access coming along?
So, yeah, to have one conversations.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So that actually might be the people who go to that. And yeah, Tom, are you on? Cars?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate.
We can't hear you.
Oh,
Let's see if it's on our side.
well, I'll keep talking so that if it pops in, you can hear, and it's.
Yeah. I think you can. Yeah. Okay, try it out, Tom.
Yeah. How are we sounding? No luck yet. Okay, so Teams folks can hear me.
Nathan Zacharias says they can hear him in the Teams meetings.
Oh, okay.
You want me to turn around?
I mean, I can hear you, Tom.
Yeah, so it sounds like Teams folks have got me.
I believe we can hear you now, Tom.
Wonderful. Hey, as always, I appreciate the task force having me, and big thanks to the Minnesota Association of Townships for hosting. I'm sorry I can't be there in person today. Do that down. So for those who haven't met me yet, I'm Tom Karst. I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications and Information Administration. I'm Minnesota's Federal Program Officer for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Initiative. This is a $42.5 billion nationally program with the ultimate mandate of getting affordable, reliable, high-speed internet to every home and business in the country. While $42.5 billion sounds like and is a big number, we want to remind that BEAD is not alone. There are other federal programs, and especially in Minnesota, other and ongoing state programs plus private investments that are all going to be working together to achieve internet for all. Minnesota has been allocated $652 million specifically for BEAD. That funding is going to flow through the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development. So when applications are being submitted, they're going to the broadband office. They'll be reviewed, scored, selected, all through there. Where we're at right now in the process is the initial proposal. This is here in Minnesota, out for public comment. The broadband office has drafted and posted their initial proposal. I believe the deadline for public comment is December 12th. And then the updated version gets sent to us at NTIA with a deadline of December 27th. When you're looking at the initial proposal for public comment, I just want to give you a kind of a brief overview on what you're going to see where. Volume 1, the big focus of this is the BEAD eligibility or location eligibility challenge process, commonly referred to nationally as the challenge process, because Minnesota's border-to-border program already has a challenge process. Minnesota gets the longer name of the BEAD eligible service location mapping challenge process. This takes the FCC's broadband data maps, which we know, they know, you know, aren't perfect. Every state has an opportunity to take their existing mapping data and say, our information is better. Submit that to NTIA. That gets layered on top of the FCC map so that when the challenge process itself opens up, it's based on the most accurate data that we have at the time. For the challenge process itself, it's open to internet service providers, units of local government, not surprisingly, townships included, and are going to be incredibly important as a part of this, and nonprofits. They'll gather challenge information in their communities. That'll get submitted to the broadband office to get reviewed, etc. And after that's processed, that is going to be the map that when we say internet for all, when we say reaching every home and business in Minnesota, that map is going to tell us where the funding needs to go, who needs to be connected. So the process itself, NTIA has laid out a model, but every state gets to effectively write their own. So it's one of those pieces where this program can be customized to Minnesota. Volume 2, as you can see just from the list there, is a lot bigger. The main chunks of this are, it's the application, the requirements, and the scoring rubric. So anyone who's looking to apply can see what they need to provide, what they need to do, and how it's going to be scored. This is another huge area for Minnesota customization. BEAD is a complex program that has requirements that will be new relative to the way Minnesota's done broadband work to date. And let's be clear, Minnesota and the broadband office have done well, very well. Border to border has been a model that's been replicated across the country. The structure of and work that the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development has done has been a model and replicated across the country. BEAD itself is a new challenge. When you're looking at $652 million that is going to be applied for, scored, and approved over a 12-month period, That's huge. And that's more that's been done before. When we're saying we need to reach every single home and business, right, that has always been the goal of Minnesota, but it is a huge challenge, which means there are going to need to be differences between border to border and the low density program and BEAD. It's a challenge, but this is Minnesota. It's one that is going to be risen to and met. The initial proposal, this is the opportunity to make BEAD Minnesota's program. To, yes, meet the federal standards and requirements, but do it in a way that works for this state. When you're looking at these requirements, NTIA lays out, this must be met. Minnesota gets to say, here's how. Here's how for us it's going to work to do this. A few pieces to draw some attention to. Requirement 8, subgrantee selection, incredibly important. The biggest section of Volume 2, and incredibly important. Requirement 12, workforce readiness, making sure that we have the capacity to deliver on this, plus paired with 11 and 13. Two of my personal favorites is cost and barrier reduction, 14, paired with the regulatory approach. That combination can be really powerful in reducing as many barriers as possible to participation, while with subgrantee selection, making sure that the funding is going to responsible parties. This is how it becomes Minnesota's. Now, with the public comment period open, because it's a new challenge, because we know there's going to need to be more, the broadband office needs to hear from everyone. It's complex. Go and read the proposal or read the draft proposals on NTIA's Broadband USA website. We have our notice of funding opportunities, our guidance documents, our frequently asked questions. It's good to review those as well, so you have a good understanding of our standards and requirements, as well as here are the questions that have been getting asked, and here are our answers. The way that we're going to reach Internet for All, it's going to have to come through all of you and take all of you. I do want to touch on one of the barriers to participation that we've heard, not only in Minnesota, but across the country. That's been the letter of credit requirement. Our notice of funding opportunity left a nice little space for alternatives to be defined. NTIA has taken the step of defining some of those alternatives. The letter of credit itself, conceptually, is about responsible use of taxpayer funding, right? Making sure that we're good stewards of your money, and that the people who are receiving it, who are going to be doing this work, are in the proper position that they need to be to make sure that what they say they're going to do is what they achieve. So the alternatives and that we've opened up are that credit unions can issue letters of credit, the use of performance bonds, those are nationally, they apply to everybody. A state-specific optional is if the state wants to set milestones, to say when you hit these milestones, the obligation percentage is reduced. And then there is the option based on how states structure their program to do an alternative percentage. And that depends on, you know, the funding mechanism and the scheduling of how that's going to work. That's one of those pieces that we can reduce a lot of barriers. And this came from stakeholder engagement, meeting with small, medium, and large internet service providers, with local units of government, with community organizations, with subject matter experts. The way that NTIA got to these is by hearing from the people who are on the ground, right? The people who are experts, the people who know this inside and out. And I like to touch on that as so much of this comes from hearing from you all. As always, we know access is the first step. Broadband also needs to be affordable. People need to have the digital skills, devices, and know the relevant content to adopt that affordable access into their lives. And ultimately, all of this, Internet for All, is about meaningfully advancing quality of life. That adopted affordable access needs to be a pipeline that provides and delivers opportunity and resources for people to meaningfully advance quality of life. We have one more plug for the various resources and documents available on Broadband USA. Always good to review. And me. I'm here as a resource, not just for the broadband office, for also all of you. If you have questions, concerns, recommendations, let the broadband office know and let me know. Always happy to talk through whatever we can to make sure that we get this Minnesota's program and that it works for this state. Thank you. Always appreciate the time. And yeah, I see. If you've got a question, comments, concern, quick qualm, query, quandary?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Wonderful. So I wanted to know, this letter of credit kind of seems to be focused around financial and insurance institutions. A lot of organizations, especially here in Minnesota, fulfill, contribution requirements using grant funding. So is there any mechanism within the NOFO to allow for, us to say, oh, we have this, amount guaranteed to us via grant in order to be able to apply?
Yes. It's separate from the letter of credit. That's going to be the match requirement. And that can work in a couple of different ways. The Minnesota Office of Broadband Development in their proposal is going to set a lot of the match requirements and standards. Broadly speaking, if you have an application put forth that has a community organization willing to say, we're going to put in X number of dollars as a part of match, that's going to be one of the pieces to help, the eventual provider, deployer, et cetera, meets that requirement, as well as a signal of community support, which, as you'll be able to see in the draft scoring rubric put together by the Broadband Office, helps. Helps boost some good points to raise the application up.
Just for clarification on that, is we do have we have to also, where those grant dollars are coming from, if it is something where our match would be 75% of the federal requirements and we allow for federal, so we just have to be careful that it may not get you to 100 if you're using those match, because it depends on your grant rules and also state, federal rules like grant dollars. So there isn't always where it's gonna get you to 100. So I don't want to put any expectations out there that those grants are specifically able to be used as match, because we need to understand what each of the grant requirements will be when it comes to the match requirements. Does that make sense?
Other questions for Tom? So, Tom, forgive me, this is Daniel. Do I recall that federal grants for this program can be utilized for match, or is that expressly prohibited in this program?
It very much depends on the grant itself. As Bria noted, everyone's treated a little bit differently. So that's going to be, if that's something you're looking at doing, that's going to be something to check in with the broadband office and with us to see the rules of that particular grant and if it can be used specifically for match. It's one of those, there's not an easy, straightforward answer. It's the classic, it depends.
Daniel, are you asking specifically about ARPA dollars and state full fiscal recovery?
That was my thought, yes.
And Congress in particular was very clear that they would not want those funds used that way.
Thank you.
For match.
Perfect.
They love it for broadband.
Perfect. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for the update and thanks for being with us. And as usual, we'll probably have you as a standing item on the agenda to give us an update on what's going on from an NTIA perspective.
Absolutely, and appreciate you having me.
Okay, and that will be a nice transition into the BEAD update. So with that, I will turn it over to Diane, please.
Yes, and so I have begged Diane to take the lead to give the updates today, and I'll follow up just because she has been most closely working on this. So thank you, Diane.
Sure. So for the BEAD money that's coming, the announcement of the allocations was at the end of June. And we submitted our 5-year action plan on July 12th. And that date differed for each eligible entity. It was based on when you signed your agreement to get BEAD. We had asked to be one of the later states, and we were state number 5. So, and then since then, we've been working on the initial proposal, and NTIA's guidance breaks that down into a volume 1 and a volume 2. They encourage states to submit their volume 1s early, and then work on their volume 2s, which was a lot more information to compile. Both the volume 1s and volume 2s have to have a 30-day comment period. There are a few states that have pushed their volume 1s through. I don't know if there's any that have had their volume. There's a few that have had their volume 2.
Sorry.
I don't think it's volume one's approved for anything. I don't think volume two's.
No,
Yeah.
they're carrying.
Okay. Yeah, the guidance keeps changing, so it's really hard to do. I don't think it'll ever be finally approved anyway. Changing. But so where we're at, because the process is so complicated and because of the compressed schedule, everything has to be done. We just decided to do our 30-day public comment period for both volume 1 and volume 2 at the same time, hoping that's less confusing for people. And so they were both posted November 13th. It looks like a lot of the states just got something up and out for public comment by mid-November. And we had to do that because it's a 30-day comment period. And these are all due at the same time because it was 180 days after the allocations ran out. So every state of eligible entities are due December 27th. And so you really needed to post by mid-November so you have at least some time to incorporate any comments from the public comment period. So we did have our volume 1 done in time to have NTIA, they also were requesting that they look at them before they got posted for public comment. So they did look at our volume one before we posted it for public comment. I can't say that we made all of their changes just because we need to say we tried to incorporate as much as we could of Minnesota's border to border requirements and have them tell us no, officially tell us no. But anyway, they did not look at our volume two. We had a meeting with Tom earlier this week, and he's indicating that now that the volume two has been posted for public comment, NTIA is looking at it for that pre-review. And so they will be providing comments to us early next week. And then we'll also have the comments that come in on the public comment period. And we'll work those into what we submit December 27th. Or by December 27th, I'd love to get that submitted, but by December 22nd, just to pump up our plate before the holidays. And so we do have 2 webinars scheduled, Monday at 3:30 and Tuesday at 8:30 in the mornings, and one morning, one afternoon, just to kind of run through it and see if there's any questions. We have the volumes posted, links on the website. There's a form you can submit comments. And we have received, I think, 4 or 5 comments so far. You can submit comments in writing if you need all of the comments by December 12th, which is the 30th day, so that we can incorporate them all. It is, I think, kind of a living document because, again, it is a draft, our best effort that was put out. We will take the comments. Even when it goes in by the December 27th deadline, I mean, NTIA is still issuing guidance. There'll be peering processes. But what happens with the timeline then is once your volume 1 is approved and your volume 2 submitted, you can open up your lead challenge process. We are working with a vendor who I think is working to do up to 10 states. To help us manage that challenge process. So we're hoping that opens in the first quarter. It's about a 90-day period. Tom did mention that per NTIA requirements, only nonprofits, local governments, including tribal governments and providers can challenge. But the portal will allow for individuals to put in their specific location information if they want to challenge availability or latency, or maybe they have information that a provider wanted to charge them a construction fee. Those things are all meaning broadband isn't available, so they can challenge. And then we will work with a local government or a nonprofit to try to roll those up and submit as a formal challenge from one of those allowed entities that can challenge. And for those of you familiar with Minnesota's border-to-border and lower population density grant programs, we also have a challenge process, but that's different. That's after the application is submitted, and that's to catch locations that are going to get served by largely private investment that we didn't know about. So the purpose of the BEAD challenge process is really to establish that starting point of addresses or locations that are eligible for BEAD funding. So if you're not on that list, going through the sub-grantee selection process, your location won't be eligible. And so it's a starting point, is I think that the best way to think about that. So you have to be on that list at the conclusion of the BEAD challenge process, be eligible for. And then what our plan indicates, once your volume 2 is approved, you have 365 days to do your sub-grantee selection. So our concern at this point is we want to make sure we have the challenge process done before our volume 2 is approved, so that we're not overlapping challenge process timeline and the sub-grantee selection timeline, which isn't fair to us because it makes our time, and it's not fair to people or entities interested in bidding or applying in the sub-grantee selection rounds, because we don't even know who the list of eligible locations are. We've asked NTIA if they could hold approval of the volume 2 until our challenge process is done, and they said no, they can't do that. So Anyway, so it's a relationship we're trying to manage. But anyway, so we have 365 days from the date of our volume 2 approval, which Tom has also indicated, they're targeting, trying to get done with all of those by the end of March. I think that's a pretty aggressive timeline. So if they do finish by the end of March, we would have to have all of our sub-grantees selected by March of 2025. We're hoping to do 3 grant selection rounds. The first 2 would focus on those unserved locations, and then funding left over can be directed to underserved locations. But anyway, having that all wrapped up 365 days after the volume 2 is approved, then that would be March of 2025. And it gets submitted as a final proposal back to NTIA. They have to approve that. Once they approve it, then we can execute contracts with the sub-grantees that are selected. So we would do that again at the earliest, sometime after March of 2025. The date that contract is fully executed with the sub-grantee is when the clock starts ticking for them, and they have 4 years to finish construction and being deploying service. So conceivably, those sub-grantees selected may not want to sign that contract, given Minnesota's short construction season, until January, February, March of 2026, so that their clock doesn't start. So we potentially could see construction in 25. I'm kind of doubting that, just because we're having a whole bunch of other issues with our permitting, and the BE funding does require a full Section 106 environmental review, which has been taking a year or more. And it's laughing. We're trying to get ahead of that train wreck now.
That's on my end.
Anyway, so for those of you that are expecting to get broadband with BEAD funding, 2025 is going to be on a very aggressive timeline. If anything is constructed then, and that assumes NTIA hits their deadline. They have not to date. I mean, we heard forever when they were going to roll out middle mile grants. We heard forever when they were going to start rolling out the tribal grants that they directly administered, and they were months behind that schedule, which makes me wonder whether they're going to be able to hit this March deadline, because they haven't been doing that with their other programs. But that's their issue, not ours. All we have to do is look at the results. But anyway, so later 2025, potentially some construction, but more likely 26, 27, and 28. So we're still years away from double speed, which is very frustrating for us. But anyway, so 4 years to construct, with the ability of the state to request NTIA to extend by a year if there are legitimate reasons. Did I get it right?
Yes.
The details better than I do.
Anyway, so that's where we're at with these. So we're still really on the front end of that. We're directed by the legislature to use our existing border-to-border grant programs to roll out the funding. So we will do that to the best of our ability. If NTIA tells us we do have the out in legislation that if we're mandated or required by federal requirements to change our state process, we can. And so we're going to be managing that too, because it's kind of a fine line. I mean, we're gonna want something to say, you can't do that like you did for border to border. You need to do it because of the federal requirements. And I want Maria at the legislature testifying on something about, well, yeah, we just decided we had to do that the federal way. And here we have, in writing, it's got to be a formal process, because there's some gray area in there as to, the way we've done the program in the past, what's in statute, what is definitely in the federal requirements. So just making sure we're tuned on that for everyone, and it makes it a little more, we need to be able to rely on something to say, yes, we had to do it that way because of this federal requirement, not we wanted to do it that way, or change the way we've been doing it. So I think that'll be a challenge or a little bit of a struggle for us to work through some of those issues as well.
Yes, yeah, oh, alright.
Just really quickly, two things. First, Dan, you mentioned that latency could be a potential grounds for a challenge. What determines that? I mean, once an end user says, my provider is not giving me, service that I'm paying for, they say, we're giving me 25 grand, I'm getting that's not.
So they have to submit a challenge and they have to have some documentation to support that. And that documentation, well, there is, but the speed test is per the NTIA requirements. So it's 3 different speed tests that have to be done. I mean, it's not going to be really easy. So once we have that, the speed test, a letter or an email from a provider saying, yeah, we'll connect you, but it's a $3,500 excess construction charge, some documentation. Then it goes to the provider, file rebuttal information, and then our office will adjudicate those. And I think Louisiana is the only state that's been through the challenge process, and they just talked about it on a call we had Tuesday afternoon of all the state broadband offices, and I think they had 160,000 challenges. So,
How many of those are coming from the region?
well,
I know that they
they
can't
have to be for individual locations, and then they're rolled up.
into
And some of them are like block challenges, so you can it's not like there was 160,000 individual.
right. It's a census tract or a block.
Yeah, so you could, make it just, you'd adjudicate the issue, but it might affect a number of locations.
Have been taken through the adjudication process and how many of those challenges have been successful in being added to their challenge.
I'm not sure if there's.
No, they just went through, like all the other states went through the adjudication process on the national broadband, or the national broadband last year. And I think they had a pretty high success rate in flipping numbers. I don't remember what the specific one is, but they're saying small-ish methodology. But nobody's actually going through the adjudication process right now.
Well, so Louisiana has received, so they've received, as you said, it sounds like they received a number of challenges, but I think it was from like 20 providers doing both challenges. My rough understanding, not during the specifics. I don't think they've been adjudicating that. That could be mistaken. But they have I think they have 30 days to do like the back and forth. I think so. I think they opened it 2 weeks ago, so they have maybe a month or so. Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze on that, so to speak. I mean, if you have to put in all that effort, and do it back and forth with the provider, that's obviously going to say, well, you're wrong, frankly, everything. How much should we be pushing that to our communities and the individuals and businesses that live in this? On like our scaling process, the onus is really on the end user, not the provider.
Right, well, we are adopting the DSL module, which makes all DSL underserved. Right. And we are trying to push through fixed wireless modular, that would make all fixed wireless under or under. And then put the burden of proof on those fixed wireless providers to say, I can serve these locations with 100 by 20 reliable broadband service. That's the top of it. But I don't think that it's right to prove that, but we have it in there.
That's all. So the public comment period is closed on the 12th.
Yes.
And then you have your final invite on the 27th.
Our final draft.
Which includes the holiday. Is that enough time to put all those comments into the draft?
We have to indicate, we receive the comments, but we don't have to actually individually account for every comment. So we'll be going through and
So even if a comment gets submitted, there is still time, even after the 27th, to, if there's a substantive comment, include it on the radar draft?
well, if we think it's a substantive comment that we want to incorporate, we'll put it in. But we can say we got comments from all, we've got, one of the comments that came in is like, you should prioritize fiber. And we're doing that, so specific or the observation. And
But you feel that's enough time. Split it in.
that's all the time we have.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And talking to somebody yesterday, and well, that was pretty bad on the culture. And they were complaining about the timeline. I'm like, don't come crying to me about the timelines. You've been dealing with this for 6 months.
So I just wanna, I know we're over on time, but just a couple of things. So it was brought up about other organizations that are involved in the process. So like SHPO, State Archaeology, DNR, and DOT. We are trying to have this conversation. As you can imagine, I'm trying to be a little bit empathetic for all of them because there are so many programs with so many rules. And to sort of navigate, is this the gap funding, is this, whatever, each funding, there's different rules. And so we're trying to sort of centrally mitigate that and have those conversations because of course, even if it isn't our project, we have this with some other NTIA project, it comes to us to fix it because our providers trust us and all of our grantees. And so we're trying to navigate that for them, but ultimately some of them are not our projects and our responsibility, but we know that this is messy. And so those conversations we are trying to have early and to help give them the support that they need. Because, as everyone is, we're short staffed across everywhere. So if you are hearing concerns, more specific concerns, let us know. Diana or I know often, we don't have it. We just hear our projects being held up because they can't get whatever. And so we can really dive into, well, what is whatever and where is it a newer consultant that hasn't dealt with this, or is it because this rule requires this review and not that review, and it's messy. So trying to do that. The other thing is, I just want to reiterate that, and Diane said this a couple different times, that we did try to put our initial plan in the best we can. This is the border to border year because that's what the legislature has directed us to do. That we wanted, at least all of you know that that's what we were trying to do. So when changes are required, that we have that to fall back on, that we really did try. The other thing is not only us, as stated, but nationally, there is some push for more legal assistance and review in these processes for states to have some representation and review of it. So I am working internally with our legal team to really help us because we are not lawyers. And so that is also happening. And then I think just to Diane's point of the adjudication process and others, we have 2 grant rounds happening as well that we will be having locations taken off the map. And so that's all happening at the same time. So the $50 million grant round and then another $50 million grant round before we want to and have to use all that money up before we get to sort of our final plan. So this team is small and mighty, but that's a lot of the past. And then I think the final thing I just want to say is he was here today to speak. A couple weeks ago, I was in DC on the Hill with different committees, advocating, working, and talking to committee staff about the challenges. So we are not alone in that process, and you'll hear more. But just know that where I can try to advocate for Minnesota, I'm trying to do that for all of you. So that was a lot, I know, and sorry, but we obviously need more time in that area when we have these meetings. I feel like that's where we get from that.
So let's move on ahead, since you have the full read, just give us an update on the digital opportunity as well. I don't know if you want to handle the speak.
Yeah, so I am gonna also have Hannah speak on that as well, and then I'll have some follow-up comments, but I think she's online. There she is.
We can have volume, but also that's possibilities.
See if I
I'm
can
just happy now, but I can hear about 30%.
during the break, we'll try to switch it.
Sorry, the volume is a little muffled here, so we're just gonna see if we can pump up the volume.
Or switch the output to the TV and keep the TV volume.
Well,
That's problem.
And it's person, not normally the guy who runs these equipment.
I think we'll try over the break.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Anna.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today. My name is Hannah Buckland. I'm the Digital Equity Program Lead with the Office of Broadband, and I love presenting after Diane gives a beat update because it makes my work seem so simple and so straightforward. With the Digital Equity Act, Minnesota's received almost $900,000 for digital equity planning. Today is actually the original end day of that grant period for the Digital Equity Planning Grant. We have an extension that'll take us through, I believe it's the end of February or mid-February. And so while we've submitted our revised draft of the plan to NTIA, we still have a few months to sort out details and figure out what we're doing as we proceed in this process. In September, we did listening sessions throughout the state and had a public comment period. We had 304 people attend those listening sessions in person or online. We also received 66 written comments that totaled 203 pages, so people had a lot to say. And the comments we received were really thoughtful and really helpful. Some of the revisions that we've made so far were being more direct and clear about funding for agriculture. We totally missed agriculture somehow in the draft. We've also added some information about public, educational, and government access TV stations, since those are key players in civic engagement, particularly on the local level and in rural communities. We heard a lot from individuals and organizations who are concerned about the future funding that we'll be receiving and how that funding will be distributed, knowing that the organizations that have the greatest need and serve groups of people who have high need are often understaffed or have limited capacity to apply for and compete for grants. So as we move forward with this, we're really keeping in mind equity in the grant making process itself. So balancing competitive opportunities with non-competitive opportunities, staggering competitive and non-competitive opportunities. So organizations with limited capacity can use a non-competitive grant to kind of build up their digital equity work and staffing, and then maybe use a competitive grant to expand further, but actually be able to compete in that space. We are now in the process of waiting. So the revised draft plan was submitted on November 21st. And we are waiting then for NTIA to come back with presumably some questions about further clarifications and information that we can add to the plan. We are also waiting to get information about the capacity grant that the state will be receiving. The capacity grant is very important because it is the grant funding that allows us to implement the activities identified in this plan. Right now, we do not know how much that grant will be for. We do not know when we will know how much that grant will be for. We do not know what the notice of funding opportunity looks like, and we have no information about the timeline for applying for and receiving those funds. So as you can imagine, it is a precarious place to find ourselves, having done a year's worth of really hard, really intentional, really engaged work. We've built trust with communities and organizations all throughout the state. And now we are turning around and telling them, you're going to have to wait, and you're going to have to wait for an indefinite length of time. So that's where we are now. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Or if I've forgotten anything, Bree, you're welcome to correct me.
Any questions for Hannah?
So I'll just add like two small things. One, I think it's really important to recognize that, as Hannah said, we know that as part of this work that applying for grants is hard. And so really trying to be thoughtful on the non-competitive grant options. And we're hopeful with in the capacity grants that will have some ability to do that. But let's be very clear right now, we do not have a NORSA funding. We do not have the guidelines or anything with the capacity grants yet. We don't know our dollar amount. So, you know, as a Ramage, I am committed to keeping Hannah and Megan, our other team member who is working specifically on our digital opportunity areas, on staff. But there is a lag of funding. And we do have the extension, so what dollars we have left in our planning, can we use that? But it's not going to cover it all. And then we also don't know, you know, if our plan isn't approved and we don't have the capacity dollars that have the admin dollars, again, there's a lapse there. Again, we are committed to this, but this might be a role that all of you play with the legislature as well. It's how committed is Minnesota to continue and invest within these opportunity areas to really complement what would come in the capacity and not delay that, because we've worked incredibly hard, Hannah and the team, to build up all of the communities. I mean, that's very relevant when you look at how many community connection communities we had across the state, over 100. So there's this interest, but you know, if it falls, then that interest goes away and other things have to come priority because they are also short-staffed and time and funding. So just something to think about as a task force in the work. So I think that's all I wanted. And again, this is still posted online or drafted, so feel free to go on and read through it and be thoughtful on that too.
Thank you, Bree. Okay, I know we have the commissioner on, so probably before we take a break, we'll have him.
Yeah, actually,
well,
maybe Bree just said it. I'm happy for you all to have your break and come back even more excited to hear my comments. So we can be flexible on that.
well, we might just take you up on a 5-minute break. We're going to try to see if we can get the volume to be better so we can hear you better in the room. So maybe let's do a 5-minute break at 11:10. That kind of schedule time we can. That's why I started turning this on. Like, oh, yeah, the lag.